The truth at the core is you should never really share stuff with people that you're not prepared to get asked to do. If I want to paint Porsches and Ferraris, all I'm going to do, even if it's just for me as a way of marketing, this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going to spend my time. Because if I break and I go, I feel like painting puppies today, which I love painting dogs, I just don't post it. It's not what I specialize in. I can't field the responses for painting people's dogs. From the marketing point of view, you've got to kind of stay focused on what you're after, because people aren't going to ask you for something that you haven't shown them you can do.
Welcome back to the Creative Endeavor Podcast. This is the podcast bringing you inspiring stories from creative professionals from around the world. It's real conversations with real artists, and I'm Andrew Tischler. How cool to have your company here in the studio once again. Thank you so much for joining me. In this conversation, I'm talking with automotive artist Chris Dunlop. Based in Southern California, Chris creates some amazing paintings of supercars, mainly Porsches and Ferraris. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm really not a car guy, but after this conversation, I'm thinking I might be becoming a car guy. The way he does what he does is just awe-inspiring. And we really get a glimpse at his process when we look at his Instagram. We get to see how these creations are built from the ground up with some really unorthodox techniques and a whole variety of mixed media. It's amazing to see these paintings come together with movement and dynamic energy. And I swear, when you look at them from a distance, they're almost photographic. Chris is an example of somebody fulfilling a niche, and I can't tell you the amount of messages and emails I get from people who are worried that the thing that they want to create might not resonate with their audience. Let me tell you right now, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as you're authentically engaged in what it is that you're doing and you're fully emotionally invested and you love it, that audience will be there, particularly if you use these online tools like the way Chris is using it. Chris right now has a thriving Instagram account with over 750,000 followers, and he sells virtually everything he paints. He's an example of somebody who's truly living the artistic dream, and so I wanted to ask him all about it. How did he get his start? Where did he come from? And how is he making this work as a business? It was a wonderful conversation, and Chris did not hold back. I cannot wait to get into this episode with you. Now, before we dive in, I just want to take a quick minute and let you know about this podcast sponsor, Rosemary & Co. Rosemary & Co. have been making the finest quality artist brushes for over 40 years. They are unmatched. Their brushes are second to none, and it's all I use here in the studio for my oil paintings. I'm using a wide variety of bristle brushes and synthetics to create what I create. But they not only make oil painting brushes, they also make the finest quality acrylic and watercolor brushes as well. Heck, they'll even make makeup brushes. I've heard about makeup artists actually using their brushes. With the experience that Rosemary & Co. have and how long they've been in this industry, it's amazing to look over their website at the wide variety that they have available, and then you see the price. They really are value for money. So check them out by clicking that link in the description down below, and a huge thank you to Rosemary & Co. for sponsoring this episode. And just one more thing. Right now, you're listening to the audio version of the Creative Endeavor podcast, but did you know there's an exclusive video version? If you want to see Chris Dunlop in his studio, and yours truly and mine, then tune in, and you can find that on Tisch Academy. Simply visit tisch.academy. That link will be down in the description as well. And you'll get a glimpse of Chris's studio, and he's got pretty amazing car behind him, and I promise you it's not a green screen. He's got like legit a Ferrari behind him, and just wait till we get into this conversation and hear the Ferrari story about when that showed up in his life. This was so cool. Okay, I'm gonna get out of here and let Chris Dunlop take over. So here he is. This is Pinstripe Chris in the Creative Endeavor. Chris, welcome to the Creative Endeavor podcast. Absolute pleasure to have you here.
Really fantastic to finally meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Well, I've not long been following you, but since following you on social media and checking out your Instagram, dude, I am blown away by how you do what you do. And I gotta say, when I'm watching some of these reels, right, as you're creating your paintings, I see them come together in the most random way, and I'm thinking, hang on a second, how's this going to turn out? How's this going to turn
Right.
out? And the paintings turn out phenomenal,
Well, thank you.
phenomenal. They are
Appreciate that.
so slick, clean, well designed, just so graphically powerful. I love what you do, man. And so I'm really following along closely now, just blown away by just the technique and skill. But I want to dig into that as well in this podcast. But
Sure.
let's just start off. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
how did this start for you? Where did this art journey begin? Because you're obviously a young guy. I want to hear about the first time maybe you picked up a brush or an airbrush, and when you first fell in love with automobiles. Tell me the story of Chris.
Well, thank you for that intro, by the way. It's very, very generous. You're very kind. I appreciate it. Funny enough, long before I was a full-time artist, I actually used to paint actual cars for a living. So my background years ago was actually in body and paint on actual cars. So, the sort of the condensed version of that is spending a lot of years seeing what lots of cars, shapes, and colors look like under various lights. So you start to kind of memorize how things work and operate. And just through my time working in body shops, eventually I was working in custom car shops. And at some point, someone suggested I pick up airbrushing. I'd always drawn, and I always was really big into color pencil. But eventually, someone's like, "You should try airbrushing," while I was working in a body shop. And then eventually, someone said, "You should try pinstriping," and that got me into doing more pinstriping and airbrushing on custom cars and motorcycles. And there was a while where I was doing just that as well. And then that sort of bridged into, once we moved to California, started doing more concept work, more hand-drawn marker and airbrush, like renderings for custom cars being built. So still like traditional on paper marker airbrush. And that sort of transitioned into doing the same conceptual artwork digitally. So getting to learn a new set of tools to kind of fit that industry. And then once I kind of felt like got as much as I could out of that side of the industry, I was just really sort of ready to focus on just paintings. And I was already doing them, like they were kind of like my brain vacation for a long time, like in between jobs. It would be just so nice to sit down to a canvas. And I just decided that's kind of really how I wanted to spend my time. There was a few instances towards the end of just doing full-time concept rendering work where I was just like, you know what, if this was the last thing that I ever worked on, this would be really, really depressing. I want to, I want to make sure what I'm doing is actually kind of fulfilling and satisfying. Mixing that with an occupation is actually really difficult. And I found that at each kind of crossroads between either trying to do, say, paint work on cars mixed with renderings, or renderings mixed with paintings, like there was always a time divide. And I found, just through the years of experience, one thing always didn't get enough attention. So the only way to really maximize being really good at something was decide to throw all the way in on one thing instead of trying to be practical about how I was spending my time.
Wow. So you focused your energy and attention when that moment was right.
Yeah, I'm not even sure that the moment was right. Sometimes I think in life we just get to a breaking point and we kind of go, if this is all that life is going to be, I'd rather risk everything and try. I mean, what's the worst that really happens? It's not really the end of the
Yeah.
world if it doesn't work. But we live in kind of this funny, like crazy multitask type of world where everyone's like, you got to be able to diversify and do these 10,000 things. What you quickly find out in large scale is that you're 12% efficient at all things and nothing really gets the right attention. And when you're doing something that's sort of customer driven, somebody's always losing in that equation. You're not doing the best work, it's not being delivered on time. There's just no win. You need to figure out what is that short list of things you can really focus on intently and be good at.
I'm hearing that. I'm definitely hearing that. That one hits home for me.
I think
Maybe
it
I'm
is
that
for a
guy.
lot of people.
Yeah, I sometimes think, am I trying to do too much? But the trouble is, I'm just excited and interested in all sorts of things. But maybe I'd benefit from some intense focus. So I want to go back to this time, that transition, that moment of your kind of regular job, if you will, to this transition into full-time art. Was that a
Yeah.
scary moment? Was that something that you felt like you had, some backing in, some confidence? Did you have any track record up to that point? Like what gave you that push to go, okay, you know what? Now we're gonna just do it. We're gonna jump in.
It's actually a great story because it's entirely built out of risk, and there was no strategy and there was no planning. The kind of the custom paint hot rod world that I came from, and this would have been 15 years ago when this happened, so it doesn't reflect the way the industry is now. In that world, you actually really didn't know if you were going to get paid that week or not. So, yeah, it's getting a regular paycheck unless you're working with like a reputable collision shop or something that's been on TV. Your average run of the mill shop, again, this is 15 years ago.
Hmm.
You really, even though you're working consistently, you didn't really know if you were going to get paid that week. That's just not that uncommon in the industry at that time. So I just finished a big job at a shop that I was working at, and they couldn't afford to pay me for that particular job, but they had paid everybody else, and they had said, you can keep working here, and once we get the money from X, Y, and Z job, we'll catch up. Well, fortunately, I've been in that position at other shops enough times where I was like, you know what, I just gotta stay at home. And when you guys are, when we're caught up, I'm not going to keep working. That's how people get trapped in a system. You get really comfortable with like, eventually I'll get paid. Eventually I'll get paid. You never really do. You got to put your foot down at some point. So the day I stopped working at that shop was the day I stayed. The first day after that was the first day I stayed home and started doing drawings and posting them on Facebook. And again, this would have been probably 13 years ago. I was posting on Facebook. So the platforms were a lot different then than they are now. So next day I was thrown into artwork. And thankfully I was never really like bad at drawing necessarily, but I think when you're starting out as a full-time artist, in that time you kind of go, well, I got to make sure my prices are reasonable, reflective of where I'm at right now. I'm a nobody. And coming from an industry where I wasn't sure if I was going to get paid, in truth, I always felt like as long as I was making more than $0, I was actually making great money.
Wow. Wow. So how long did it take you for you to start gaining some sort of traction online then?
Not much, honestly, because once you have time on your side, this is actually kind of goes back to the earlier point about dividing your time. I think
Mm,
a lot of artists struggle with trying to balance a full-time job and an art job. If art is your hobby, you can enjoy that to the nth degree without any additional concerns, and I think that actually works really, really well. But if you say I've quit my job and I've got nothing but time on my side, that pretty much means I'm planted in front of the computer while I'm drawing, which means I can interact in real time, field requests very, very quickly, which I still do to this day, even though the following size has changed. So, like I said, Facebook and Instagram were different landscapes then, but
mm.
being able to draw really, really quickly and be able to post, get that up, and be able to field the conversation in real time, field things really quickly. It's just diligence at that point, but you have to have time on your side to really dedicate that because the way that the apps function is a is a byproduct of a lot of those things: interaction time, duration, post frequency. There's a million variables.
Mm, well, it seems to be working so well for you now. I mean,
I have a lot of practice.
yeah, your following is so impressive, and just from a numbers point of view, but it's little wonder why when we see the quality of your work and the consistency. And the other thing, I'm reflecting on these things a lot since my podcast with Natalia Cartman and also Dina Brodsky. My head's in the gram. I'm just thinking constantly about
Mm,
Instagram.
of
And
course,
I got a bit of a love-hate relationship with it, and I'm
I think
anything.
everyone does.
I am so not consistent at all. But
Oh man,
you seem to have this thing, kind of worked out and fine-tuned. A couple of things I want to ask you, but let's
sure.
just stay on the social media side of things, specifically. How do you does this take any amount of study looking into, or homework on your part to just stay on top of things, or are you just kind of finding things out organically, what works, what doesn't work? Like how much time are you spending on it rather than in it? Does that make sense? You know?
Yeah, totally makes sense, and it's actually a really good question because the answer can be really revealing. And in some ways, I'm constantly on it. Because I'm keeping track of data all the time. I think so. I've been on Instagram this year, actually June, what we're in, will be 12 or 13 years that I've been on Instagram. If you're paying attention while you're doing it, you should always be collecting the data. The thing that's tricky about all platforms, Instagram included, is that the parameters always change. So it doesn't matter what strategy you're implementing now, figure in 3 to 4 months, it's going to stop working for some reason or another. So there has to be a lot of adaptability there. And I can see why that wears a lot of people out, because all the things are going great, and then one day views plummet or interaction plummets. And it's very easy to take something like that personal, like maybe people don't like my artwork anymore, or maybe they don't like what I'm doing. This is the function of the apps trying to find an audience for what you do. They're always changing, so we always have to adapt. The friction is that people tend to complain out loud on the very platform that they're angry at, and it has the opposite effect. It's better to just put your energy towards figuring out a solution. I take the perspective of, say, videos. Videos is a great example. Take the perspective that the video is a form of art itself. If the video doesn't perform well, it's not a reflection necessarily of the art. That's a separate thing. Did I do a good job on the artwork is a different answer than did I do a good job of the video. So that they can be somewhat compartmentalized. And then every single time that you post, whether it's a story, a photo post, or a reel, you have the opportunity to learn something every single time, whether it's positive or negative. You should be paying attention to the data. If this is like your occupation or your primary marketing, everything that you can learn is useful. If you just think that you're getting lucky and unlucky, you can't strategize with that. That doesn't really help you. So I'm always on the app more or less. When I'm painting, I've got my phone on silent. I'm very, very focused on just getting done what I'm getting done. But I have a strategy around when I post, or how that kind of bubble of interaction works, because it makes a big difference. But when I'm working, my focus is on doing the work. When I'm social meeting, I'm focused on social meeting. I'm not trying to paint while I'm on Instagram.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I'll circle back to that in a second, but
Okay.
I want to ask you now. So just on that, on your focus, on the time you dedicate to this, I've just pulled up a reel here on my other screen of you painting on a what? Let's see, what is this car? Ferrari 488 Pista,
Yeah,
Pista.
Pista. Yeah.
Pista, beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Acrylics 18 by 24. Dude, amazing. Amazing.
Thank you.
Your technique is just incredible. And I gotta say, techniques, as I'm watching you paint carbon fiber, I'm like, good night. He's got the weaving. He's got the weaving on the carbon fiber and that translucent quality of the resin floating over the top. It's just so cool. So dang
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
So now this video here, I mean, this shows so much more than what we're seeing in this video. Like, this has got to take hours, if not days. So how long on average are you spending on a piece like an 18 by 24?
On average, most paintings take between 1 and 3 days. So 3 days is a pretty long window.
Right.
And then I kind of include into that what I think will be video production time, because I'm filming as I'm painting.
Yes.
So to give you like the more specifics of it, say Monday I start on a new painting, Wednesday I'm finishing up, Thursday I'm editing a reel, Friday morning I'm posting a reel. So there's just kind of a really tight window around what that art production is going to look like that week.
Okay. So your video production then for the reel, like, is that taking you a full day to produce that reel in post? Like
No,
on.
thank goodness. I've done enough of them at this point. I've got a
Okay.
pretty good system for editing, and they're not long format, so they don't take, there's not an enormous amount of footage to go through. I have a really specific way that I shoot. And I'll tell you, if anybody's listening to this that thinks that this might be useful, it saves a ton of time. So rather than shoot continuous, what I do is I've got my camera on a tripod, and I only film what I think is going to look good in a video. So I grab a tripod and phone, and I put it next to whatever I'm going to paint for that shot. So instead of having a bunch of 10-minute shots where I'm trying to find 2 seconds, I take maybe 25 10-second clips. It's way easier to edit because it's linear. It's all stacked together. You're just trying to clip it together to make it look fit. I'm trying to make the editing job as seamless as possible. I don't want to look for the clip. I want to just edit it very fluidly and in a straight line. So while I'm painting, I'll go, okay, I think this will look good on camera, I hope. And then, I shoot that and set it aside and That way, the other thing is I don't like a camera in my face when I'm painting. I don't want a distraction. I don't want to bump into it. So I only want it next to me only when I'm shooting something that needs to go in the video. Other than that, if I wasn't videoing, it would take half the time to do these paintings because it is sort of a distraction in some ways. But I also recognize the importance of the marketing of that form of media
Mhm.
trumps everything else. It's really important to get the video.
Right, right. And I personally, I don't think that can be overstated, the importance of what th this opportunity presents, right? We
Yeah,
have now something that's essentially free. It's just
it
going to
is
cost
really.
us a bit of time, and
It's effort. Yeah,
the potential payoff is massive.
yeah.
So I definitely see that, but with this amount of following, like I forgive me for asking just such a crass question here, but
All good.
you've got to be selling pretty much 100% of your production now at this point, right?
Pretty close because because I don't offer reproductions or prints anymore, the focus is just on
Wow.
originals, which was a
Wow.
big shift for me for a few years ago, and it changed everything. It was amazing.
Right. So
Um,
so you did have the like a limited edition kind of print on demand
yeah.
type business. Okay.
As
So
a matter of fact,
why stop that?
so we actually did prints in house. We have a more medium format printer here.
Wow.
And if anybody has ever done their own prints, they know that it's like six more full-time jobs
Yes.
between
Yes.
photoing, color correction, running test prints.
That's right.
Oh, we're out of that ink. Go figure. Now I have to buy $180 worth of material just to get that ink. Gosh, I hope that can arrive in time. That's before signing, numbering, packing, shipping. Like there's a lot. And I think it's still a really, really great way for almost any artist to make revenue. What I found happened for me, and it was just kind of a gamble, as is all things, but I wanted to try it because I was in a really, really good spot after finishing a huge job. And I had a lot of like financial buffer room to roll the dice on a few things. And I decided what I wanted to try was just focusing on originals because I felt like, that's probably doesn't apply to many people, but just this is a weird example, but I just felt like my focus on the artwork was to make a good print, and I had less focus on actually doing a good painting. And I just kind of wondered what would the artwork look like if I wasn't worried about how many prints could I sell? What if I was more focused on how good of a job can I do this one painting? And in truth, what ended up happening was the cost for originals went way up, and we were able to move every single original. Selling my originals while we were selling prints was almost impossible. I'll be completely honest. There was just, you create a competitiveness within your own thing where somebody goes, I can get a cheaper version. Why would I spend $5,000?
Wow.
But also
That's so
understand
interesting.
it's also the caveat to that is the subject that I'm painting in. So I'm an automotive artist. While there's a lot of places in the artwork that have really, really broad appeal. Cars and artwork don't have this really big, huge, happy overlap space where there's a huge demand.
Yeah.
So the side of people that are really stoked to buy prints, which there are tons of, and there's a great way to live on that side, is very different to the side of people who are willing to buy originals. People are really passionate about a car that they own or something like that, want to have something as genuine as possible. And I found that when we stopped offering the cheaper option, we immediately got into a different segment of buyers because that was the only option that was available.
Wow. Okay. Okay, let me ask. So what's the demographic? Like who's buying this? I can imagine somebody, they've got a nice car, a bit like the
Sure,
Ferrari that's sitting behind you. For the folks
sure.
listening to the audio version of this podcast, you got to check out the video version of the podcast available on Tish Academy exclusively. If for nothing else, just to see the Ferrari behind Chris. It's a real Ferrari, not a picture of a
It's
Ferrari,
real.
a freaking real Ferrari, dude.
That's funny.
We checked. It's not green screen. I can confirm that. So the people that are buying these, I can imagine, you go out, you get a nice car, and then you want to kind of immortalize this moment almost and just have like a bit of something, on the wall, but have something that
Yeah.
that is more than just a picture, a piece of artwork. Like, do you
Yeah.
find that that is something that happens often where people are actually directly commissioning things?
Yeah, quite a lot because, I mean, just coming from the car world prior to doing paintings, people have a really emotional connection with cars that are special to them. More than the case of like what I have is like an aspiration car, something that I've wanted since I was a kid. There's tons of people that have, there's Porsche or a Ferrari that they want to have one day, and actually buying the artwork is kind of like a commitment to the dream. I get to hang this in my office as like a motivational poster, but it's like it's the one that I want. It's the color, it's the wheels, it's exactly what I want. Or somebody had one and they had to sell it too soon, and it's just a nice way to commemorate. Or it's a gift for a friend, the friend that can afford to buy anything. What do you get them? You get to get them something extra special and unique. So there's a really unique connection with people in their cars and being able to bridge that gap with artwork. But there's something in another tier of that, and this applies in a lot of different levels of the art world, is the majority of what I paint is, say, like Ferraris, Porsches, and McLarens, is a very different demographic to, say, other things that I like, like classic Volkswagens and motorcycles. You do naturally appeal to a different type of person just by merit of what you do. And say social media, for example, is what you use as your primary marketing, or even your website, a great example. Um, the truth at the core is you should never really share stuff with people that you're not prepared to get asked to do. What is the thing that you want people to be interested in you doing for them? If I want to paint Porsches and Ferraris, all I'm going to do, even if it's just for me as a way of marketing, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to spend my time. Because if I break and I go, I feel like painting puppies today, which I love painting dogs, I just don't post it because it's not what I specialize in. I can't field the responses for painting people's dogs. So, from the marketing point of view, you got to kind of stay focused on what you're after, because people aren't going to ask you for something that you haven't shown them you can do.
I love what you said there. Like, it's interesting what commercial success can do to an artist, right? And art is that thing that's supposed to be this authentic expression, this thing from within that we're drawing out. And whenever there's some sort of reward that's associated with that,
Yeah,
it tends to direct us in ways. I admire your
yeah,
your your personal strength and your conviction here of sticking to what truly interests you and putting that out on social media. You're so right, man. You're so right. There's a lot of commissions that I've done in the past that I just won't post. They will never go on my website because I don't want to do any of those. I don't want
I
I don't want to
understand.
I don't want to be known for that. I don't want to do any of those. I've
Yeah, I
done
hear
some
you.
weird things, but it's great that you've got that. It's so smart. It's just so smart. So let me ask you this, because you know your work is consistently just such incredible quality, and I really
Thank you.
mean that. I want people, if they haven't already, I want people right now to have a look at the show notes and to check out your Instagram, to check out your website if they're not already following you, but they probably are. But I want people to check this out and just really get a load of the way that you're creating these. I want to ask now about the artwork itself. So
Sure.
with how do you go about collecting reference material? I mean, are you doing your own
Ooh.
shoots? Are you finding anything online? Tell me what that process looks like for you.
Yeah, it's actually a great question. It's something I get a lot. So right now it's a mix. I find that the answer has changed a lot over time. Right now, my main preference is to go out and shoot the cars, at least the details areas or the angle that I think might look good in a composition. Say I know I'm gonna shoot I can set up a phone to shoot in a 3:4 aspect ratio or 2:3. So right away, I can shoot a car and kind of go, this is exactly the fit that I'm looking for on the canvas while I'm shooting. No legwork after. I'm happy to draw from scratch, but if I can go and shoot the cars, I can accomplish 80% of the work. The caveat to the way that I work is that I'm not worried about lighting or colors. I always make up my own lighting on every piece. I do it from scratch. So I don't need,
Wow.
yeah. So I don't care about the shadows. I don't care about the lightings. I could shoot everything in black and white. Doesn't matter to me what color the car is. So the other answer to that question is, as far as the composition, the cars that are in motion, they're not in motion when I shoot them. I paint them in motion. The lighting on, say, that 488 wasn't like that in the warehouse that I was in. The taillights weren't on. I can tell you that. Taillights are never on. So there's always, those are like the little kind of artistic gifts that you give yourself. If you have a great reference, that can be like, that's the bones for a great starting point. But you as the artist should be making some decisions in there to make it different than the photo that you shot. Unless it's an epic photo. But I just think if I was going to replicate a photo, it's not really my thing. It kind of defeats the purpose of what I do. I want to do something that's that level of quality, but I want to be able to use my imagination somewhere too.
That's so cool to hear. And forgive me because, myself, I'm sure some others would just look at this and assume this is like, high level photorealism where that reference is something that you're heavily relying on. But to hear that you're using those imaginative elements is just incredible. But there's something else that you're doing here, and I'd love to pick your brain on this because I'm
Sure.
watching right now a reel of a Porsche 911,
What
20
color?
by 20 by 30. It's kind of like a steel blue. And
Okay.
what I'll do is I'll share my screen here, and you'll be able to see exactly the one that I'm looking at here. So
Oh, yeah.
this piece here, um,
Yeah.
absolutely stunning. So
Thank you.
so this 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 work here, okay. I'm watching so many different techniques. You start off,
Yeah.
run us through this process of how the image gets built because I'm seeing
Sure.
splatters of paint, the airbrush, pencil work, fine lines, different brushes involved. And then the end of it, it's just, dude, it's this weird mix of abstract and realism, and there's just so
Mm,
much going on. It's
I
it's a
appreciate that.
yeah. Tell me, let's geek out about the art.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, that's a great example of where there is no photo reference for that. Where would that even come from, right? That's a
Yeah.
bunch of ideas placed on top of a photo that I shot. I think that car was red when it was here. But colors are secondary to the story that is trying to be told on canvas. But that scene, that setting, the speed, the rain, I think on that, like none of those things exist. Those are just decisions that happen in the moment. But to go back to the core, the question you're actually asking actually relates to something I did want to mention about Reels.
Hmm.
In the early days of Reels, like say early pandemic or whatever, I was actually really reluctant to get into sharing videos of the process because I was sort of apprehensive about what people would think about the way that I work, because it looks really terrible in the beginning and then it slowly turns into something. Whereas I watch artists that could like paint something from the left corner to the bottom right corner and it's just perfect. And I go, man, people are going to think I'm nuts the way that I paint. What I didn't realize, because you can't know this without putting it out there, is the way that I do things is so like stupid and dumb that it's interesting to watch because you have no idea what the end result's going to be. So the really wacky process that I have turns out to be a good hook to get you to watch the end result.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hooks are everything, aren't they? I mean, especially with social
especially in
media.
short format. Yeah,
Oh, this is something that I'm learning right now. It's like you got to hook them right away. This is exactly what I've
yeah.
been doing wrong for so long. But you're
Well, the thing
right.
is, it's
Yeah.
yeah, the thing is, it's also really tricky if you have. I could paint at this point. I could probably do any of the paintings beginning to end really cleanly. There's two problems that that doesn't solve. One, it's not that interesting to do. I kind of want to do something destructive in the beginning just to be a little bit freeing because I know it's going to tighten up towards the end anyways. And two, it doesn't check the box for the video, which is the marketing. I'm concerned about the marketing in the beginning. I need to know that I'm creating a video that people are going to watch to the end because that's where the reveal is. I need people to get to the end of the video to see what the artwork looks like. So that's where I say the videos kind of end up being a different form of art than the painting itself. To answer more specifically the question about the mix of processes, because I know that the end result is going to be really, really tight at the end, I could start that way. But I find that when I start really, really tight, I don't really have a lot of fun painting. It's just kind of building shapes and building value, and it's fine. It works out really great as an end result, but as a process, it's sort of boring. So I find that the more mess I make in the beginning, the more I'm more sort of problems I set up myself to solve. And so, I do
Interesting.
a wild underpaint and then I kind of go, all right, well, now I have to figure out how to work with this. So this is part of why I don't do a whole lot of pre-planning for the paintings. Whatever the background does, I go, okay, what can I use that's here? Well, how can I build from this? And that's spontaneous every single time. I might have an idea of what color the background texture is going to be or something, but you can't plan all of that. And that's what I want. I want to start with some spontaneity so that I get a unique result every time. You can build from anything. Paint is paint. You can keep painting until it looks amazing. But I found just through experimenting that it was harder to come up with a spontaneous result at the end than it was at the beginning. Because if you start loose to tight, you can put all the details in over time. If you make something amazing and then you go, how do I ruin this to look interesting? You're making compromises at the end. You're ruining something that you spent good time on.
Oh, there's so much more in that little statement yeah, that I think some would realize. That is so interesting. That is so interesting. Yeah, yeah. Maybe because I'm coming at this from a different point of view, and this is why I'm really so excited to talk to you because getting a glimpse into this process, you can see exactly how you're setting yourself up, almost like a chess game, as in a way. It's like it's move by move, but you're creating these interesting problems to take advantage of, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
I think personally, I could really benefit from an approach like that. My approach sometimes, whilst it works and I enjoy it, it's something that I've been developing for years. Maybe it could benefit from a little bit of that spontaneity in those initial stages. But no, that's cool. So
I
okay,
think,
okay. Oh, sorry. Go on.
yeah. No, I was just gonna say, I think as artists, especially on social media and especially with time, we learn to get better at things,
Hmm.
and it makes it harder to feel comfortable taking risks. We kind of go, we have this tried and true formula. Why would I want to depart from that? And that's true at the core. You go, yes, this is my target end result for the quality that I want. When I think about the way that I work, I'm not doing like I don't have bold oil painting brush strokes. I don't have a way to get that look because of the material and the way that I work. Like, so I just think about how can I get that that pushy, spontaneous feel in a realm that is comfortable that I do understand, but also gives me some room to play. While also, because again, as I say, like you could paint until the cows come home. I could do a terrible underpainting that you'll never see at the end result. If it's so bad, I will just cover it all up with paint. But as you say, it gives you problems to solve, which I think can be more interesting if I had a
Mm.
staged result. You just don't really feel as involved in the process. And I think sometimes like the happy accidents or the errors that somebody will call out in social media, like, oh, you got this wrong. And I'm like, thank goodness I left an error in there. So there's proof that a human did it because that's really important. So, it gets harder to take risks the longer you do something because you tend to get better at details. You tend to handle brushes better. We tend to think that the evolution of us as artists means constant improvement, which technically is always true. But sometimes it's just innovation or being different. Just what's the right now version of me that wants to paint this? Like, how can I get some bold brushstrokes in here without compromising detail and quality?
Are you worried about the robots, Chris?
The AI, you mean?
The AI taking your job?
Not really. No, I mean I've been a freelance artist for like 15 years, so I'm not really that worried, to be honest. It's
That's
not.
good.
I can understand why a lot of artists are. The thing is, when I was really getting going, doing art, see, like 12 or 13 years ago, and digital art was really kind of coming into its own boom. And when I also made the transition into doing digital concept artwork at the time because it was the most economical and logical for what I was doing. What the thing that I thought was really interesting at that time, and I think will be continue to be true, if not more so now, is I thought that digital artwork might take away the demand and value for traditional artwork. I was completely wrong. If anything, it drove the value of traditional artwork up because it
Wow.
it is something special for the person that wants to spend for that original. There's less people now holding paintbrushes than Apple pens or tablets. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's not. It's not a competitive. We're not on the same. These artists aren't pulling artwork from us. We're not pulling from them. they happily live in their area doing what they want to do, and we're kind of doing over here doing this other thing. It's not We're not adversaries. We're just doing different things.
Interesting that you say that about driving the price of the original up, because I mean these are always the fears that come up, that it's going to somehow upset the apple cart and completely ruin,
Hmm.
one thing or another. So my particular stance, and people know this from listening to the podcast, and if they saw that video I did about AI. Now, I'm not a big fan of AI personally when it comes to your artwork and using that to, either create reference or create
Yeah,
the initial spark of an idea. I feel it takes the art away from things, but I also don't want to shame people who decide that that's their mode of doing things. I mean, you do you, man. It's all good, but it's just
yeah,
personally, I think it's a bad idea. Um, but the other side of that was, and I even got a comment on a YouTube video about this where someone was saying, "Hey, look, AI's already got you whipped," and I'm like, "Well, but it's a completely different thing. It's a completely different thing."
yeah,
So I'm not so worried personally about AI, taking my job
yeah,
and replacing me. I think actually the opposite effect's going to happen, where you're going to end up with a larger demand on those things that are made by hand, those things that are crafted, those things that show human ingenuity and creativity,
yeah,
where the poetry is there, because there's something that's just missing when AI does it. And personally, like, I'll be like just scrolling along on my phone, and I wonder if folks can relate to this, but you're just scrolling along. You'll see something that's like, oh, far out. That looks kind of cool. I'll have a look at the hashtags, hashtag AI art or whatever,
yeah.
AI something. And I'm like, okay, I'm out. I'm
It sort
done.
of deflates the feeling, doesn't it?
It totally does. It totally does.
Yeah,
But, if it was made by a person, it'd be like, hey,
it would be impressive. Yeah,
props.
exactly,
I'm
exactly.
impressed, man. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
So that's really cool to hear that you've got that stance. Otherwise, we might have a bit of a Barney here on the podcast. So that's good.
Nah. Yeah, I'm not so worried about it. And like I said, I
Yeah.
can understand why people are, especially from the point of view of social
Mm.
media. But I just, again, because why I specifically paint cars, the
Mhm.
the type of people that I work with are truly looking for an analog experience within cars. Like literally, people pay more money for a stick than they do an automatic, at least here.
Wow.
Reason is the visceral feeling connection to what they're driving, riding. So artwork is a lot the same way. Does somebody who really wants to have a valid driving experience, does an AI piece of artwork really check the box for them? And I think that also comes back to the point of demographic. If you're selling high volume prints, I could see the pathway where someone could go, yeah, this is the best way. I'm not interested in that, so it's not even on my radar. I'm not even thinking about it.
Mm.
I'm going to do what I do. And the reason that works is because I've been doing it this way for a long time. You can create demand just by consistency.
Mm.
Yeah, or to switch over to something like that, it would be insane. I have no problem with people using it. I do think the using it for reference is kind of odd because it's not very good at that. Just based on surface level things, and honestly, something like a subject that you know well or subject that I know well, I can go outside and take a picture of it right now, and it's going to be 100% accurate. How much effort
Mhm.
is that? It's really not that much effort.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's just, I think it will get to a point where AI becomes so scary in terms of how good it will get. But
Mm,
I'm sticking to my guns on this, where
yeah,
it's still about the art and the craft at the end
yeah.
of the day. Um,
Actually,
yeah.
I was literally talking to an artist about this just the other
Mm.
day because I get comments all the time. I get a lot of comments on the videos where they go, "This is great, but AI could have done this in 2 seconds." I get a lot of comments like that now.
Wow.
Yeah, people are pretty nice. Anyways, yeah, and I'm not worried. It's all good. I reply
Yeah.
to everybody. I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
But that actually, to me, validates why the video is so important. Without the video record, there's no proof that this was actually done by a person. Because if you look at the end result, generally, the way that I paint is pretty tight at the end, but the video kind of validates the entire process.
That's that's interesting to hear. Absolutely. I mean, because otherwise, what have you got? And that's your proof, isn't it? That's your proof.
It's Yeah, that's why I don't post photos anymore. It wouldn't be one, it's not interesting to look at as an end result, as a standalone, I should say,
Mm,
because I don't have painterly brushwork. There's nothing to really indicate that it's a painting. When you're looking at a tiny little phone screen.
hmm
So not only is the video entertainment, it is proof of process.
right. So, but before we get into more of this marketing stuff, and also I want to ask you specifically about your art business, how you make this work. But already I'm getting a really good idea about it. I just want to stick on the painting side of things just for a moment. So one
Sure.
thing I'm noticing is, from these reels, like we can learn so much by just watching a reel. I mean, it's right there without much of a commentary. I see you've got your canvas already there, pre-stretched, ready to go. You're pouring out acrylic paint, then you seem to do a sketch up. So is this the process that you've landed on? Maybe talk to us about the materials that you're using and this
Yeah.
process for folks that are interested. I'm totally hooked, man. I'm so interested in how you do what you
Well, I
do. So
appreciate it.
take us from the ground layer up, how
Yeah.
these things come together.
So thankfully, it's a pretty consistent system at this point. I will change variables periodically if I think I need a different look. But I'll usually start with a pre-stretched canvas, not always, but whether I'm stretching my own or buying pre-stretched. I love Frederick's canvas. It's about as smooth as you can get right off the bat. Oftentimes I'll work from something that is stretched because say it's a commission or a request or something that I'm doing for fun. I kind of want to have an idea of the size parameter, and it kind of gets me to the finished result a little bit quicker as far as varnish and framing at the end. So I start with something that's kind of rigid and ready to go because I do open canvases sometimes, but it does create some later production problems. But in any case, I've got a canvas. It could be gessoed, or I could put some clear gesso on it just to smooth it a little bit more. And then I'll do a sketch. And normally, and this is quite odd as it turns out, I usually do the sketches in Bic pen, ballpoint pen.
Wow.
Yeah, that's oftentimes what you hear at the first beginning of the video is a scratchy sound. I might have like a rough sketch, and then I'll do the final sketch on line weights in Bic pen. And a lot of that comes from doing traditional illustrations years ago. I always sketch in pen. I cannot stand drawing in pencil. It's just not my thing. So I draw everything in pen, even though that's kind of dangerous for paintings in canvas. But I like it's one of the few things that like you can look close and go, wow, there's still a drawing under here. I want to leave some of that behind.
Wow.
And also because of the next step, putting the fluid acrylic down, something that's really, really reduced, because ballpoint pen is a different solvent, it's not interactive with acrylic. So I can spray that down with water, I can spray it down with medium, and the line drawing will 100% stay put. It will not move. Obviously, every artist is different. A lot of artists don't work in line work the way that I do. But again, coming from the illustration background, it's just this go-to for me. So I
Mhm.
want to get the line work down first, and then put this splash down and kind of work with this wash. Either create some visual textures. They're not heavy paint textures, just subtractive textures. If I can remove some paint, I can show the white canvas back through. And then once that draw, obviously it's all acrylic, so we're talking like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and I can get on to the next stage. And I'll either start blocking colors in with an airbrush, or I'll block it in with a paintbrush, depending on what I think the look for that needs to be. Kind of the really tricky thing is that it really doesn't come together until the very, very, very end, not only in the video, but in the real process. So
Mhm.
there's this, say I'm working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. There's all of Tuesday where I'm like, God, I didn't even really know if this is going to come together. I just kind of hope, that the highlights and the edges and all that work that comes at the end for me, I hope that makes sense. And it almost always does, not always, but there's this really big lull in the middle of the process where you're like, I don't know, I hope it'll come together because I do the highlights and details at the end, which is where everything sharpens up. So I don't worry about edges or details until the last couple of hours. So if I'm freehand airbrushing or I'm soft blending, I'm not worried about edge sharpness yet, usually, because I can do that at the end
Mhm.
to figure out what I'm going to bring forward and what I'm going to push back. You could obviously paint something that way the whole way through. It's just not how I think about things. I want to do that part at the end. Again, it's just coming from the illustration world. You just kind of paintings are like this anyways. Work loose to tight, and I do all the tight at the end so I can create that point of focus.
Ah, wow. And the finish seems to be one of the most important aspects of the painting because this seems to
Unfortunately,
be
yes.
well, I'm seeing things though in your reels, like the finish is interesting paint effects, splatters, little pops of light, little color bursts, the
Yeah.
halo. One thing that's really clever, I gotta go to this. And again, for people listening to the audio version alone without watching the video, I feel sorry for y'all. You gotta check out the video version of this. At least go and check out some of these reels that we're talking about here on Chris's Instagram. But the way you'll do a headlight that's in light, and then you've got like this camera lens flare
Mm,
effect where then you've
yeah.
got like a ghost of that headlight superimposed, but completely off by one light's space off to the
Yeah.
right or the left. That's cool. I'm watching this right now on your Porsche 911 Targa.
Nice.
Insane. By the way, you're showing off when you got two brushes, one in each hand, and you're detailing. I see what you're doing there. This is
That's funny.
this is so cool, man. So cool. So
Thank you.
there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of techniques that we could just learn from watching just a minute video. Let me ask you that. Is there anything? Would you ever teach your techniques? Because I don't see a lot of people doing this. Has teaching ever been something that's interested you or something you'd be into?
I've kind of been like back and forth on that for a long, long time. I love the idea. The reason that I like have never really pulled the trigger on it or gotten full into it is because I still think that what I do doesn't make sense. So I'm not sure that qualifies me to instruct other people to do something that I don't think makes sense. Especially because the way that I paint is so reliant on patience at the end. You really have to muscle through a bunch of different techniques and a bunch of different tools and a bunch of different comfort levels, and it all can come together. But I'm not sure that I'm qualified to help somebody wade through the stress of. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna come together. You just got to place the highlights right. It'll be okay. I like the idea of teaching. We used to do lives on Instagram every week before that went to the wayside, just to be able to share more and be able to answer questions.
Mhm.
And I like the idea of that. The one caveat that I really do have to teaching, not because I'm against teaching. Well, there's two things. One, there's already a ton of amazing artists that I follow that already do such a good job of that. You go, I don't really think I can add anything that more qualified artists like you are already. I've watched your YouTube videos because I'm looking for tips. I'm not sure that I want to watch a video of mine where I go, this guy's hair's on fire. I don't even think this guy's process isn't making sense. I like watching artists that have a more direct process because it helps answer questions for me. I'm
Right.
not sure that I'm not sure that what I'm doing, I think the end result people might want to get to, maybe not the process that I'm doing.
Well,
The other,
I don't know, man. I'm sorry to cut you off, but
oh, it's good.
I really feel like there is so much. You're playing this down too much. There's so much here that you have to offer, and I would even I couldn't even guess at what a landscape painter in oils could offer you while you're painting this Porsche 911 Targa.
You'd be
Like,
surprised. That's why I love following so many different artists. Actually,
yeah,
the majority of artists I follow on, say, like Instagram are landscape, portrait, and animal artists because they're automatically doing something different than what I'm doing, and that's what I want to see. I don't.
right.
I mean, I love following other automotive artists, but that's not like it doesn't really get me outside of my normal thinking. I want to see how somebody paints something that I don't paint and how that idea might translate. So I actually am making the case that you're making, actually. The exposure to other ideas can help you solve different problems.
Well, I think this absolutely has got to be like, on YouTube as a teaching channel, because I think it could be huge. But I mean, it all comes down to what you have time for sure.
Yeah.
But I just the thing that excites me is that, and maybe it's just my ignorance here about this genre, but I don't really see many people doing this. There's fantastic artist right now. Her name's Ray Roberts, and she does
Yeah.
amazing automotive art as
Yeah.
well. I'm
Yeah.
following her, and but I don't really see many people in the space, and maybe that's just because I'm not following enough. But I haven't seen
It is
anything
pretty
like this
niche.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of great automotive artists around the world, but it is very niche. It is so all 10 of us probably know each other. But that is that is another side to anything that's business related
Mm.
is, understanding that there's going to be a smaller need for people in this world. There's going to be a lot of people that haven't heard of you if you're outside of that world, which is obviously completely appropriate. So finding a space where you can make artwork that you really, really like, say something in the automotive field, and know that there's a small pool of people doing it, and there's probably, there's not like a ton of demand. So if you can maximize the demand in a small space, you can actually do really well.
It's about the niche, right? It's about the niche.
Sometimes they say, you should really niche down, or, contemporary thinking is like, you should be more broad. And I think this gets back to the point of like, doing what you want people to ask you to do.
Mm.
I mean, if you're really gifted at drawing or painting, you can literally paint or draw anything. But is that really what you want? Do you want to be the person that does everything? For some people, that answer will be yes, absolutely. I want to do whatever somebody is willing to do, and I'll have fun doing anything. But there is value in being a specialist at something. If you're willing to kind of paint or draw anything, I don't know, it kind of has like a sort of a I'm still finding myself quality to it. I think every now and then we all kind of want to change a gears, a change of scenery. But I think, for at least my experience personally, that's something that you can also do behind the scenes. And there's stuff that I want to paint that's not cars. I'm not using it as content because I don't feel like my whole life needs to be content. It's more like the therapy for me to kind of go, I kind of want to just paint. I want to switch it up a little bit. And that's really for me. Um, yeah. So just because you can paint anything, maybe doesn't mean that you should. What's the thing? Imagine there's a version of you that's going to do this for 15 or 20 years. What's the thing that you think you want to do for that amount of time?
Mm. Mm. I really hope you're enjoying this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. I just want to take a quick minute and tell you about this podcast sponsor, Rosemary & Co. Rosemary & Co. have been making the finest quality artist brushes for well over 40 years. You can check them out by clicking that link in the description below. I'm telling you right now, this is all I use here in the studio. And as soon as I came across their brushes, it opened up a world of techniques. I wasn't able to engage with my process and shift that paint to quite the same level as when Rosemary & Co. brushes showed up in my life. And it's such a pleasure to be working with these brushes exclusively now. They not only make the finest quality oil painting brushes, but they also make acrylic brushes and watercolor brushes as well. So check them out. You can find them by clicking that link in the description down below or by visiting rosemaryandco.com. All right, thank you so much for allowing this brief interruption, and a huge thank you once again to Rosemary & Co. for sponsoring this episode of The Creative Endeavor. Let's jump right back into our conversation with Chris Dunlop. Something that I heard Alex Hormozy say, which it really resonated with me, which was niches build riches. And
That's interesting.
just in terms of, I think by being too broad, not only can this lead to some sort of mental fatigue as an artist, but also it really confuses the message, doesn't it, from a marketing point of view? Like
Unfortunately, a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, and so having your niche clearly defined, like this is me, this is what interests me, and just being genuine about that, being authentic about that.
Yeah.
I think there's a fear that comes up for a lot of people, certainly with people that I talk to and I receive messages from, going, well, what if no one's going to be interested in this thing that I really want to do? And
Sure.
I just tell them, hey, listen, man, there's going to be freaks out there just like you. If you just
Always.
paint what you want to paint, and do that to the best of your ability. Put yourself out there to the best of your ability, and somebody out there is going to want to pick that up. You will actually end
Yeah.
up building a more sustainable following because you're not trying to be something you're not. And the
Right.
world's full of people doing that, full of artists doing that.
Yeah.
Not you, not you. So just be absolutely genuine and authentic in what you're doing. And
Yeah.
I think, Chris, you're a wonderful example of that. This is something that, is incredibly niche, but just shows what you can do when you do this at such a level, such a quality. You can really build a strong demand and a huge following. It's amazing.
I think there's a lot of stick-to-itiveness to it as well. I mean, I think um, people will probably have no idea that there's tons of people that told me this was a terrible idea. You'll never make any money as an automotive artist or as an artist in general. We live in a different time where it's like crazy, super possible. Anybody can do this. But the ability to draw and paint has nothing to do with your level of commitment. That is a different story. How long are you willing to see it through?
Okay, let's spend some time on this. So mindset then is pretty important for you. What do
Not
you
only that, yeah.
what are you doing to cultivate this ironclad mindset that you seem to have? Because, you know, obviously, again, all I can go by is by looking at the quality of your work and the consistency of what you're putting out there, which is just top notch and consistently top notch. So
I appreciate
so
it.
what has been that factor for you? I mean, are you listening to stuff? Are you studying stuff, or have you just cultivated this personality, this way of being that allows you to get the most out of this? Tell me about that. How'd you arrive at your mindset?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, I think in life, especially any artist can probably relate that like everything is kind of comes and goes in waves. There's down times, there's things when, there's just days that aren't so good, weeks that aren't so good, or painting that's just not coming together. I like so much the process of painting that kind of like checks all the boxes for me because it's really involved and there is a lot of problem solving. So it keeps me really active and involved in it, especially new challenges. But I think because something like social media can feel very passive, one day you only have a few hundred followers and you get a million views on something. You go, oh, wow, that's amazing. I should be able to build from that. I see this to people that are starting out on social media that get tons of views right away, which is an amazing thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with your long-term success. Social media lives in moments, really, really, really brief moments. So how you leverage that, how you capitalize on that, or how you set yourself up for the next million view video, for example. And sometimes it's hard to subtract what you want to do and how you want to work from the social media part. Like I hope this does well, I hope this gets a million views or whatever the deal is, but it's important to kind of create some barriers in there so you don't feel like the performance of your content is reflection of who you are as a person or as an artist. They are not the same thing. But it's designed to make us feel like it's the same thing. So once you kind of pull back a little bit and go, okay, this post didn't do well. It's not because it's terrible. Maybe I posted the wrong time of day or it wasn't a very interesting color, something that, helps it feel a little bit less personal. But consistency at the end of the day for any artist, I think makes the biggest difference. If somebody was starting out today and they're like, I really want to get into like, painting farm animals or cottages, I'd be like, cool, post that consistently for the next 3 months. Then tell me how it's going. Not only because you get to test yourself as a creative, can I stick with it this long? But you get real data. Doing something for a month isn't long enough to decide whether it will drive you insane or to cultivate the people that might be interested in seeing more of it. It takes a long time to build up an audience of people that are interested in your specific things. When you jump back and forth between ideas, styles, you confuse not only your audience, but the algorithm. It doesn't know what to do with you, who to share you with.
That one hits home for me, particularly. I think I am guilty of confusing that poor algorithm. I am doing a little bit too much of this and a little bit too much of that. And I from the last podcast that people may have caught, the one with Dina Brodsky, um, after having done some of her course, I'm not all the way through with it at the time of recording this call with you. It's been very interesting learning a few of these insights. And so one thing I've decided to do is actually separate the Creative Endeavor podcast from my normal Instagram because I've been posting
Oh,
shorts and
interesting.
reels and
Yeah,
putting that up on my social media, but I'm posting a lot of other people's artwork. And it's like, dude, who post your stuff? So
right.
and again, I think the direction that I need to go in personally is doing kind of the thing that you're doing, consistently doing my thing. And I'm a huge believer in this. Success leaves clues. If you want to get what they got, you got to do what they did. So I hope that
That's
people are
interesting.
are picking this up and really paying attention right now. But again, just to go back to like, so in order to do this full time, you don't have a boss breathing down your neck. You're not being pushed
Yeah,
to do this. Like the drive has to come from within. So how
that's
do you
true.
how do you make sure that you show up? What is the thing that's motivating you or inspiring you? I mean, you seem to love this. You seem to
Yeah,
be like all in, emotionally here, which is awesome. So what's
yeah.
the thing that continues to fuel that fire for you?
That's a great question. I think I'm also one of the few people that like loves working from home. I love to be able to roll out of bed and start on a painting right away. I don't really care what time of day or morning or night it is. Um, and I've learned just through time and people that were working remotely for a long time and talking with them that that's kind of a personality thing. Not everybody is cut out to work from home.
Mhm.
It doesn't actually work as well for everybody as I thought it would, but I like being as close to what I'm doing as possible so that in a moment I can see something that needs to make a change or I can keep going on something. I like so much what I do that it's all that I want to do, which can be dangerous at times. But I think also coming from a couple of industries that felt like they didn't really value me as a person, this is the greatest job I could have ever hoped for. Like, this is the coolest alternative future that I've always wanted to do this since I was a kid. But, I just had a lot of adults around me, like everybody else, that said, yeah, that's not a thing that you can really aspire to do as a professional and hope to make it. The people then couldn't imagine what social media and the internet was going to be like now. Now it's possible for anybody, but like I was saying before, this the stick to itiveness. You have to see something all the way through, and I feel that way about paintings as well. I don't really know what it's going to look like to the end, so I have no choice but to see it all the way to the end. That's why I only work on one painting at a time, so that I can finish something before I start something else. And I think everything in life, largely for me, is that way. I want to commit to it fully and go at the end and go, oh, okay, well, this is terrible. Doesn't matter. I can start on something else next. But I find, just to get off topic slightly, I've never been a person that'd be like, I'm going to pick up another canvas while I'm waiting to see where this one goes, because I like the idea that if I'm frustrated or something about a painting, I will make decisions differently, whether they're good or bad. And I love that because it's a different version of you making those decisions. So that one will automatically have a different look than all the other ones.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I got about 42 paintings on the go currently
Holy
here in the
yeah.
studio. Like,
I assume you're working primarily in oils.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But
it kind of makes a little bit of a difference.
no excuse. I mean, especially if you're using alkyd resins and they dry the next
That's
day.
true.
Just
That's a good point.
get on with it, dude. So I don't know what. Yeah, I might just be mental. I think that's it. Um, the stick to itiveness. I just want to echo that. This is something that is so important across so many different things. So many different things. I talked about this on the podcast a few years ago, back in some of those earlier episodes. And I was on a real thing at that time about, the physical training and how that can be such a metaphor for all sorts of things in your life. And it was so interesting, from talking to other artists, how many artists that I actually talk to, how many of them work out. And this is something I haven't been able to train for nearly a full year until about
Whoa.
2.5 months ago. And as soon as I got the all clear, I'm like, dude, I'm all in. I'm back. I'm back, baby. And so it's been 6 days a week
Oh, wow.
consistently, in the gym. And this is the thing. It's like you do anything consistently and stick with it long enough, you get those results. But the
Yeah.
thing I find with a lot of beginners, whether they're in the gym or they're at the easel, is that because of that lack of results immediately,
Yeah.
there's just this quitability too soon. They give up on it too soon. And I think a lot of these things, they take months, if not years, of staying in that zone and just continuing
Yeah.
to go through it. Um, and so I hope people really hear that. It certainly hits home for me that this is something that really it requires that mindset, that bulldog determination to just go, no, I'm doing this. I'm going to stick with it, in the face
Yeah.
of people telling you. no, this is a terrible idea. Chris, don't do it.
Yeah,
I just
right.
I hope in some way, that those people who told you that, maybe some of them are still in your life and you get to pull up out front in that Ferrari and say, by the way, no. So I got to ask you a cheeky question here. Did you get the
Sure.
Ferrari as a result of being such a badass painter, or was this something that came before your art career?
No, no. All the cars and vehicles I have are a result of artwork. I've been doing artwork all long enough that everything I have is a result of artwork.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, so it is
Okay.
possible. But also, I'm in the car art world. Cars mean more to me than just the product of doing the paintings. I love cars and motorcycles. I love going for a good drive. So owning them to me is just as much a part of the experience.
Awesome. Tell me the story about the Ferrari here. What kind of Ferrari is it?
Uh,
When did you get it? Tell me about it. It's a beautiful car.
sure.
Beautiful.
I'll give you the cliff notes. It's a 348 Spider. I bought it almost 3 years ago, and it was after I finished a really big art installation. I had another artist help me. It was for a car collection here locally, and the job went great. And I just decided that it was time to reward myself. I've got other cars as well. This is just the one that lives inside that I get to look at every day. But I just Ferraris to me is kind of like a childhood dream aspiration car, and it was kind of like sort of like checking a box in life. There's all kinds of things in life that we want, that we kind of aspire. Like, one day when I'm made, I'll know I've made it when I've got X, Y, and Z. And in truth, because I've had a lot of ups and downs in my art career, some of those experiences can be very hollow. Buying something that you think is going to reward yourself doesn't always fulfill you in the way that you think that it will, because they're largely just possessions and you're just parting with a lot of money out of your bank account to hopefully make you feel better. But because Ferrari and Porsche are kind of like childhood aspiration cars of mine, it did more than that. It's just kind of, you get to experience achieving a childhood dream through the means of having a career that nobody thought was possible. It's kind of a funny thing to kind of be in that moment. So it means an awful lot to me. It took a long time to find a good one, or the one that I really wanted. So I'm stoked to have it, which is why I love to look at it every day. But yeah, there is kind of a love hate between possessions that you think will. It's good to it's good to celebrate your successes, but not to think that the things that you buy to treat yourself will make you feel any differently about life. They really don't.
I, Fair enough. Fair enough. But I mean, such such a cool car and such a great
Thank you.
a reward for your hard work, your dedication, your years of just sticking with it. So I got to ask, what are some of the other cars in your collection?
I've got a detailer on the other side. I've got a newer 911. I've got the Ducati, the 899. I've got the Husqvarna, the 401. I've got a classic Volkswagen outside. I think that's it right now. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I like everything that I have, so I'm not always searching for something new. I'm not always looking for a way to spend money. I just want to enjoy what I have.
That's
Because
so
I
cool.
because I work from home. I don't have a commute. So when I go to drive or ride somewhere, it's a choice to have fun and enjoy whatever that driving experience is.
You pull up in style.
Well, you want to enjoy the ride. I'm not worried about what
Exactly.
anybody else thinks about what I'm where I'm at. I have the cheapest cars in the world compared to where I'm at. So it's more about the internal experience.
For sure, for sure. That's so cool, bro. That's really awesome. So now moving forward, in terms of your art business, what's next for you? What are you're gonna continue to make paintings? Is there anything on the horizon? Any big projects? Any exhibitions? One thing I actually want to ask you about is,
Sure.
and again, forgive me for if I'm making too bold of an assumption here, but you are self-represented, right?
Entirely. I've
And
never been in a gallery.
oh, okay, hang on. Never been in a gallery. Never been
I
at
sell
that.
car
Yeah,
artwork.
no,
It's not,
listen.
there's not a,
I think any gallery that knows what they're doing ought to pick up some of your pieces, try and make a deal with you, do something because it's obviously sellable. So And galleries, well, I mean, let's face it, galleries want to sell art. They want to make money. They're a business, right?
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
just so interesting to hear that, somebody as accomplished as yourself, having done this for now for many years, is entirely self-represented. It just shows that this is possible, right?
It is totally possible. I've worked with collaborators and stuff in the past, galleries that were interested or people willing to sell on our behalf. To be honest, the thing that I struggle with is sort of the revenue share model, where you kind of go, all right, I'm going to lose 50% of this, 40% of this, which means we either have to price this with that in mind, which I think prices us out of our niche right off the bat. And the thing is, the thing that I always come back to is at the core here by myself, I have no trouble selling every single piece of artwork. Why would I throw a wrench into that system?
Exactly right.
If somebody knocked on my door and said, "Hey, we can sell these for 10x what you're selling them for," all right, let me hear you out. Let me hear the thing. The other reason that I don't have stuff in galleries or hanging up in places is because I can sell something quickly and I can get to the framers and we can get shipping, within a week or so. Once it's somewhere else, that process becomes a little bit out of my control. And because the marketing is largely takes place on social media, it gets people over to the website. Like it's a pretty enclosed ecosystem, to where everything kind of operates in this really tight circle. So it's really easy to monitor and keep track of. Whereas once you start introducing galleries and other people, you're like, I have artwork. It's somewhere else. It's potentially worth money. Um, yeah, yeah, I have a little trouble with that.
Fair enough. That's so exciting. That's so exciting though, to just hear, what you've been able to do through your hard work, your stick-to-itiveness, your dedication here. And
I
yeah,
do think that galleries can work.
for sure.
I don't have broad appeal type artwork.
Mm,
I don't think so. There's a reason it probably doesn't land in galleries so much, but it's not hurting me not being in a gallery, so I
mm,
don't take it personally.
mm.
But I don't think that's the answer for every artist. I think there's plenty of artists that are wildly successful because of galleries.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I guess you got to find that mode that works for you. And when you're on,
Yeah,
as you say, not wanting to throw a wrench into that system, when you're on something that is working, stick with it. Maybe tweak
yeah,
and adjust a little bit, see if you can get even more out of it. But
yeah. You
so
always need to measure results.
so how did you arrive at pricing your work then? And is this something that you continue to review and maybe even adjust or increase?
Sure. It's funny because I watched another artist video on YouTube. I watch a lot of artists on YouTube, Lisa Lecree. And remember years ago watching a video that she had put up about how she priced her artwork. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is genius. It's so straightforward. At the time, I wasn't doing anything remotely like that. And what she explained made so much sense. And it actually changed everything. So, so a lot of artists these days will charge by like a square inch or linear inch,
Hmm.
and that's great. And so what I do is linear inch, and what that sets up is a very simple formula. In 2 seconds, I can give somebody a quote for what their painting is going to cost, as opposed to let me get back to you. That's where art commissions go to die, in the dead space in between communication. Let me get back to you. If I can give somebody a number very quickly, again, just coming from the car world, we're used to customer service kind of happening in this very, very specific oriented way. It doesn't mean I'm good at it. I understand what the system is meant to look like, especially working with people above a certain means that are comfortable spending money. They don't want to waste a whole lot of time in communication. What can you do for me? What's the cost? When's it going to be here? Answer the most important questions as quickly as possible. So I think having a pricing structure that's not what I refer to with other artists as based in emotion, how much are you emotionally attached to this piece? I think it's really dangerous. So I like the idea of pricing essentially based on size. If you're doing linear inch or square inch, that sets all your 18 by 24s up to be the same price, all your 16 by 20s to be the same price, all your 40 by 50s to be the same price, because it gives people, when they're on your website or looking through your artwork, some expectation of what they might get as far as cost per size, as opposed to, oh, I saw this on your site for, a few $1,000s, and they're asking for a quote and it's twice what they saw on the website. Why is this one so much more? This doesn't create a good starting point with a relationship for somebody that actively already wants to do something with you. So I think a more consistent system is really helpful. The good thing about square inch and linear inch is that you can adjust as time goes on. As demand increases or goes down, you can ebb and flow with it in really, really small amounts and make a good system out of that.
Right, right. That's a really, yeah, really logical, straightforward approach. I love that. Absolutely love that. So, so while we've been talking here, I've got your website up on the other screen, and I've been kind of going back and forth between the Instagram and the website. So, how important of a feature is your website in your art business, and what are some of the things that you need this website to do as a professional
Yeah,
artist?
that's a great question. Website is like fundamentally at the core, just as important as the social media. If you're not giving people a place to go see a gallery of artwork, and give them some options to buy or options to contact, which to some degree you can do on social media. For me, the challenge is when you have a really large following, it's not realistic to respond to every single message and every single inquiry. What I like to say is there's more shoppers than buyers. So it's not realistic to reply to everybody. So I take higher priority over people who are messaging me directly through the website because I know that they're more interested. They're putting in more effort to reach me than somebody who's DMing me on Instagram, for example. I will try to get to as many messages as I can, but it's not the highest priority as the people going to the website. This is more likely where we're going to have a more direct conversation. The main purpose of the website is to serve as the base gallery. Because I only post videos now on social media, the only place you can see a still shot of the final painting is on the website. It's the only place you can go to see it. Everything else is process video. So they serve a separate feature, which makes them valuable independently, which is good. See the finished piece on my website, and automatically you're getting the finished details, the size, the cost, the shipping, all of that lives there very, very easily. Ideally, with the least amount of clicks possible, so people don't have to what they refer to as friction points, the least amount of friction somebody has to go through to either see something or make a decision. So, because oftentimes when you're dealing, say, with like corporate or say really wealthy people, generally aren't on social media to begin with, you do still need to be able to direct them somewhere. Does a car manufacturer that I work with want to check out my Instagram? Maybe for some credibility, but in terms of finished artwork and presentation, you can scroll through hit a scroll on the website really quickly and see, a lot of paintings back to back to back to back without dealing with the comments, the Instagram, the messages, the audio, the blah, 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 blah. It's just very focused. This is what the finished artwork will look like. Because at the end of the day, the person who's either interested in buying something, commissioning something, they don't need all the noise of social media to make a decision about buying. This is what's going to look like what's on my wall. This is as straight to the point as it's going to get.
Mm. It's so important. One thing that I've said for many years about the website, just something that's vitally important is it's got to be able to get somebody's email address. You have got to
Mm.
get somebody's contact information. An email list can be incredibly powerful. Are you ever sending out an email or a newsletter or something over email to your customers at all? Do you find a need to do that?
Actually, no. Yeah,
Interesting.
I've,
Wow.
yeah, but I support that idea. I think it's a great idea. There's a few reasons that I don't personally do it, and they're not good reasons. They're more like time management and structure. I
Hmm.
think email lists, especially with other creatives I talk to, I know how important it is. It's just not something that I personally implemented. The good news is it doesn't matter where you're at in life. There's always room to improve, right?
Absolutely.
So that is something that I actually do genuinely think is important that I'm not currently implementing correctly. There's a couple of things I have to kind of get over in my head a little bit about how I do things to make it have the right feel and structure that I think would make sense. For the most part, new artwork of mine will sell within a few days of it being posted on Instagram. I typically
Awesome.
don't have anything to put in a newsletter.
Awesome. Awesome.
If I was selling reproductions or we had a back catalog or something like that, like there's a strategy where that works. And I think that we'll get there. Just right now, it doesn't fill a need that I have. So, and I find I'm like a really big into efficiency. I don't put effort into things that aren't going to yield anything different than the result they currently have. So we can't, if I've got pieces that are available, that's great. But if we don't, I'm not going to add extra steps to my, like, I want to focus on painting, not on all these other things.
For sure. Oh, well,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, why? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is so exciting. Like you've given me so much food for thought here in this conversation. I hope
Oh,
that
that's funny.
people listening to this conversation have also got something out of it. This has just been such a treat to get to talk to you, Chris. Um, I'd love to know. So some of the next things that you're working on. What are some of those next projects? I asked that before. Forgive me. I'll use this as an opportunity to round out our conversation here.
Yeah. No
But
worries.
what's next on the horizon for Chris Dunlop?
Oh, I've always got a ton of paintings that I'm working on, so that's kind of like the core of things moving through.
Hmm.
But I periodically have a couple of big jobs that I can't even predict. That just somebody calls one day and we're doing something next week. I keep a really fluid working schedule for that reason, because one day the phone rings and it's a company that needs something next week, so we get on a plane. But fortunately, like next week, I've got a new 911 coming in from Singapore to do an art car on for a show in Northern California later in August. So that'll probably be this year's like fun, exciting job. We get to cover the car and artwork and do a finished clear coat on it with another shop.
Awesome. So,
Yeah.
what's one car that you haven't painted yet that you would love to paint? Is there anything
Oh.
left that you would just love to tackle?
That's a great question, because I've painted so much. There isn't a lot that I haven't done that I like. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't done that I don't care for. Um, I don't know. I would have to really think about that. Every now and then something pops up, something new. That's the great thing about the car world. Every year there's new stuff. You kind of go, I want to tackle that, or I want to see what it's like to paint that or those details. So that'll have to probably be a future car. I don't think there's anything. There's always cars that I want to paint more of, or spend more time on. But yeah, right now I just kind of look to the future, see what comes out next.
Really cool. Well, I think this conversation has turned me into a car guy. I never was a car guy before. I
What
think
kind of
I'm
car
now
have you got?
uh, I've got a Mazda BT50 four-wheel drive,
Nice.
just a
All
utility
right.
vehicle. And again,
Perfect.
I'm not a car guy, but I gave up my dream car. There was only ever one car that I ever really wanted. And I don't care what people think of me for saying this, but it's kind of a cool car. I had a Toyota FJ Cruiser, and
Oh, no kidding.
my wife, every time she got in that, she was just like, "Oh, this is so uncomfortable, and it bounces so much down the highway." I'm like, yeah, but how cool is it? And she says, and it
This is the
drinks so
greatest thing
much.
ever.
Yeah, it drinks so much gas. Like, are you kidding? That this is terrible. We need to get rid of this and get something more family friendly. And granted, it was not family friendly, but
Right.
I did tell her. I said, hey, if ever the business does really good, you know what I'm going to do? She's like, you're going to buy that dang FJ Cruiser back, aren't you? I'm like, you bet I am.
Oh man, you better
And then
find one while you can. They got
the
quite a cult following.
the irony now, the irony is it's half the price of the vehicle that I'm driving now. So I'm just like, this thing costs twice as
Well, the
much.
vehicle you have now is probably twice as safe, so it's trade-offs.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah,
But no, I'm gonna get some personalized license plate, Daddy Mobile or something like that. But
nice.
yeah, but I don't know. It's got nothing on a Ferrari, bro. So well, I might have to set my sights a little higher. But
You never
Chris,
know.
what a treat this was. Thank you so much for being on this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast.
Dude, thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Creative Endeavor podcast. Thank you so much for spending this time with us here in the studio. How cool was that? You can find Chris Dunlop right now by following him on Instagram at pinstripe_Chris and on his website, artofchrisdunlop.com. And I'll include those links in the description that accompanies this podcast. It's so cool to hear an example of a professional artist working today who has found their niche and is thriving within it. If you ever were wondering Is what you do or the thing that you would really love to do, is that a little bit off the wall, a little bit weird? Well, here with Chris, not that I'm calling his artwork weird, but it certainly is a niche. And here with Chris, we see an example of somebody who's thriving within something that is incredibly specialized. Not only thriving, but selling virtually everything he paints. Just awesome. Now, if you enjoyed this episode and you're just as inspired as I am, then please do me a huge favor and leave me a rating or a review on whatever platform you're listening on. It makes a huge difference to the show, and I really appreciate you doing that. It helps this get out to more people. I can't thank you enough. And while you're at it, if you wouldn't mind sharing this on your Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, and get this out there to more people. Thank you so much for doing that. And again, I couldn't do it without you. I hope to have many more episodes of the Creative Endeavor podcast coming your way, so we'll keep the inspiration flowing. I really appreciate you being in this space with me. Okay, I'm going to get out of here and get back to painting, but I really enjoyed your company here today, and I'll see you again in another episode of the Creative Endeavor.